Hello, it's me, Chuck, and this is your message for Sunday, June 28th, 2020. However, before I share the words that I have prepared for you on this Lord's Day, let's take a moment, as we normally do, and simply bow our heads and share in a word of prayer. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, just as we perhaps read in Psalm 52:10, as we come to you today, create in each of us a clean heart and renew our spirits. So as we observe all that is transpiring before us, we can simply respond with faith. Because through faith, there can and always will be hope. Because even in the midst of grief, sadness, anger, indifference, or uncertainty, with all that has taken place within our respective communities, we still find hope because we can also observe others. Even in this unrest, we can observe others being kind and considerate, good-natured and understanding, and of course caring, especially when these beautiful things are needed most. And perhaps coming to you in prayer not only provides us a sense of hope, but also the recognition of your divine blessing, because we still witness this faith in others. Even in the midst of all those things that we observe weighing heavy upon our hearts. So with confidence, O Lord, let us pray for those indeed who are upon our hearts and our minds on this day. Pray for those grieving for the passing of a loved one or a dear friend. Pray for those recovering from, preparing for, or just enduring some form of injury or health concern. Pray for those who feel displaced, discouraged, perhaps even a little disengaged from everything that has taken place within their community. Which reminds us, we need to continue to pray for our governing officials, medical and municipal professionals, and the many others who have responded to any or all of these circumstances. Help guide them and inspire them and their responses to continue to be responses of dignity and respect, which in turn helps foster hope for us in the days ahead. In short, O Lord, whether it be for hope, health, strength, or assurance, respond to any of these observed needs in your own divine and compassionate way. As we now take this moment and come to you as a family of faith and share those words that your Son himself had taught us to say. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Before I share our gospel reading for today, since I am sharing today's message near my home on the shorelines of Wolf Run Creek here in Lexington, I want to have a little fun and ask you all something. What is being implied when someone says so-and-so is being like a fish out of water? What's being implied, or what does it mean when someone asks or states or perhaps even assumes that you are like being a fish out of water? And I would imagine, as most of us knows, this basically means that, well, it's more or less implying that you're uncomfortable, maybe even clueless, perhaps even a little compromised or a little on being the intimidated, you know? You're being on the intimidated side because at that moment, you might be in some sort of unfamiliar situation or an unfamiliar surrounding. So let me ask, who here has ever had a moment within their lives where they indeed felt as though that maybe, just maybe, they're being like a fish out of water? Visualize this with me for a moment. Have you ever experienced a moment like this within your life? Was it at work? Perhaps at your school? With your family, with your friends, perhaps even at a church? And even though these places I just mentioned efforts are often made for all to feel welcome and feel comfortable and so forth, it still didn't matter, right? Because for some reason, you had these feelings of being like a fish out of water. And have you ever asked yourself why you felt this way? What were the reasons, the feelings, the heart of the matter? And perhaps these reasons why are likely a little bit too up close and personal to be reliving right now at the moment. Let me ask a more crucial question. Are you willing to own up to these feelings? And perhaps even more importantly, can you recall how it was that you remedied these feelings? Was it by your own accord, through confidence, assurance, a little knack, if you will? Or did someone in some way help you overcome these feelings of being a fish out of water? This is something I want us to kind of think about in the back of our minds, especially when you consider the words I'm about to share with you from our gospel reading for today. Let us now hear Matthew 10, verses 40 through 42. Hear these words. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Gracious Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, because you are our strength, you're our rock, you're our Redeemer. Amen. When I was thinking about these words that I just shared with you all from our gospel reading, I was kind of reminded of a very awesome story that we can read of in 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning around verse 8. It was that occasion when Elisha was traveling through this place called Shunem. And at one point or another, Elisha crossed paths with a woman of means who, coincidentally, shared in his faith. And of course, like many who share in faith, what do they socially like to do? This woman, she urged Elisha to join her and her husband for a meal, because that's what people of faith like to do. We like to share in a meal. We love to break bread together, right? Anyway, of course, Elisha graciously accepted the offer, and likewise, they all became good friends. And from that point on, whenever Elisha passed through that little community of Shunem, he would stop by and say hi, and of course, share in a meal. And then one day, actually, let me just read what it says right there in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 9 through 10. Let me just read that little passage. She said to her husband, "This man who regularly passes our way is a holy man of God. Let us make a small roof chamber with walls and put there for him a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that he can stay here whenever he comes to visit us." I don't know about you, but this sounds kind of like they prepared a sort of guest room for their newfound friend, Elisha. A guest room that, whenever it might be needed, he can come and have his rest. And though the lesson of this particular story we find in 2 Kings chapter 4 has a much more heartfelt purpose and outcome shared later pertaining to their only son, which I do encourage you to read this story, let me point out an additional and very awesome, if not downright obvious lesson in life and faith we should be able to observe. In short, this is a wonderful story about hospitality. You have a married couple becoming good friends with a fellow brother in faith. They went out of their way, endured both inconvenience and expense, simply building a spare room, if ever needed, for their newfound friend. And even though this story took place some 500 years before Christ shared the words we heard in our gospel reading for today, think about what is being applied when someone recognizes an opportunity to simply share their faith in some way. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet or a righteous person in the name of faith, there is great reward. In short, this moment that's articulated in 2 Kings chapter 4, this welcoming brother, sister in faith, welcoming someone else, especially when it matters most, it is an excellent example, a core value of faith that I hope we can all relate to. Because think about it, what could be the potential? What could say be the hope for the future of the world that we know? Whether it was back then or here and now, when we can observe hospitality, no matter in what shape or form it is indeed being shared, it is a core value of faith we should all embrace. I mean, think about it. Actually, let's think about the example of Christ and how he showed hospitality in many ways, in many forms. You see, to Jesus, hospitality, simply put, meant having a welcoming acceptance, i.e., a willingness to accept anyone who would cross his path and share in faith. I mean, he was willing to be friends in his society with anyone that they deemed as being unacceptable. He wasn't afraid to care for the lame, the blind, even the lepers. In fact, he would care for them on the Sabbath. Big no-no back in those days. He also wasn't ashamed or afraid to be seen sharing a meal with tax collectors and other sinners. And wasn't there this time when he reminded everyone present that whoever's without sin, go ahead and cast that first stone? Meaning, come on. Don't be so quick to condemn and judge, but be sympathetic, be compassionate, be a brother or sister in faith to someone who obviously recognizes that a mistake was made. In short, hospitality is not only important to Jesus and how he shared it and showed it to other people, it was at the very heart of being one in faith with God. And it didn't make any difference to him where such hospitality took place, or to whom, or on what day. Not to mention, think about the original question I had posed earlier. If you've ever had one of those moments where you felt like you were a fish out of water, how'd you overcome those feelings? Did you overcome these feelings because of your own accord, your own confidence, assurance, your own knack, if you will? Or did someone extend a little hospitality to you in their own way that helped you overcome these feelings? Especially when you think about what Christ shared there in verse 42. I hope you can be honest with your answer. In fact, let me read verse 42 again. It says, Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose the reward. Now think about this for a moment. Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, none will lose the reward. You know, Jesus, at this very moment, he was telling us, well, something very similar to that golden rule that we are very familiar with about doing unto others and so forth. But let me tell you, I think there's something a bit more we need to identify. You see, a cup of cold water, it's a gift that seems kind of on the not so significant side, you know. It seems like no big deal because, you know, back then and during Christ's time, it was something anyone could give or at least offer. It was the smallest of gifts. It didn't represent any wealth or anything like that. It just represented, it was a social gesture, you know. Giving a cold cup of water to someone was a social gesture of being kind, being considerate, perhaps just good-natured, understanding, and of course, caring. But let me ask a rather obvious question with another obvious answer. Even if this is just a social gesture, could it potentially be one of the most precious things to the person receiving it? Because maybe something going on within their lives at that given moment. Maybe there's something going on that we might not be aware of, and you give that person a cold drink of water. And it's a difference between night and day. Because maybe that person you just gave a cold drink of water to was feeling like a fish out of water. See, this is why hospitality is at the very heart being a great sister or brother in faith. You just provide it in any way you can, whenever the opportunity presents itself, because you never know what kind of difference it may provide to someone else. In fact, I'm reminded of the very first sermon I gave right here at Wolf Run Creek back on March 15th. Let's take a trip down memory lane for a second. That first sermon I shared that first weekend, it was right before all the closures started taking place. I'm sure y'all remember that, definitely. Anyway, I prepared a message inspired from that moment when Christ met a certain Samaritan woman at the well that we can all read of in John chapter 4. And the reason why I thought of this very first sermon today, when I was preparing the words I was sharing with you right now, was Christ initiated the conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well by asking her for a cold drink of water. If you recall the story, think about what took place at this very meaningful moment when Christ and a woman at the well became friends. You see, Christ was willing to welcome this woman as a sister in faith within his life, was willing to become friends with her no matter who she was. Why? Because she was willing to share the faith with him as well. And this woman, if you know the story, you can second guess that this woman was no stranger to having difficulties with life. But you know what? Even if she was a Samaritan, even if she had a questionable past as kind of implied in that particular chapter in the Gospel of John, that didn't matter to Christ. What mattered to Christ is recognizing that all are welcome to faith, all meaning all. And whether it be showing hospitality or generosity, i.e. sharing what God has blessed you with and providing to others, or just being kind, considerate, good-natured, understanding, being caring, perhaps even being loving. I mean, isn't there a lesson in life and faith about loving your neighbors? What could be the potential? What could be the potential within the world that we know here and now if we just simply showed hospitality in some shape or form with others? Because I'll be blunt for a moment, I'm not naive to the recent events that are weighing heavy upon all our hearts. I mean, I'm not naive about the concerns, the fears, perhaps even the indifference that any one of us could observe by simply watching the news, or for that matter, read any of the concerns or comments being shared right now on social media. There's a lot of indifference in this world right now. And yet, even with the recent developments, limitations, recommendations, specific advocacies, or whatever, let me go back to the original question that I asked at the beginning of this message. In the near future, do you think it's possible, with all the changes, all the concerns, all the realities that we as a people of faith are facing, do you think we might be having some being like fish out of water moments in the days ahead? What are the chances that you, me, will feel like a fish out of water, maybe even this afternoon after you're done watching this video? And I think we know the answer to this. But let me ask another question. Can we as individuals, or perhaps more importantly, as a family of faith, whether an immediate family from Clintonville or the many extended family members that we share in faith through this video, who knows where they're watching from at this very moment, can we overcome and prevail as children of God? And I think the answer is a very definite yes. Because as long as we welcome one another and welcome Christ and the one who sent Christ, i.e. God, as they welcome us, as long as we do this, as long as we're being hospitable, kind, considerate, good-natured, understanding, caring, being loving, I think if we simply do this, we will indeed always have hope. Hope you've enjoyed our time we've shared together on this Lord's Day. And before I conclude our message, let me share one final benediction that's adapted from Hebrews 13, verse 16. Go forth and simply share what is good. Go forth and simply share what you have, for such indeed is pleasing to God. Go forth and be the brother or sister in faith that God knows you to be, now and forevermore. Amen.